She found a lost pendant in his coat, identical to her daughter's, down to the engraved initials. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's story. It was another quiet night at La Belle Époque, one of Manhattan's most exclusive restaurants. The lighting was dim, casting shadows on the crisp white tablecloths that draped across every table. The sound of clinking silverware and hushed conversations filled the air as the city's elite gathered to indulge in exquisite cuisine. Among the patrons sat Jack Anderson, a successful CEO known for his hard exterior and ruthless business tactics. His eyes, however, betrayed a hint of frustration as he checked his phone for the third time in the past 5 minutes. His blind date, arranged by his best friend, had yet to show up. Jack had no interest in blind dates. He was a man who preferred control, and tonight, he felt that control slipping away. Little did he know, the evening would not unfold the way he expected. Enter Christina Matthews, a waitress at the restaurant. Christina had been on her feet for hours, serving plates of delicacies to Manhattan's finest. She was exhausted, but professional. Despite the long shifts and the tiredness weighing her down, she never let her discomfort show. As she moved gracefully between the tables, Jack's gaze lingered on her for a brief moment. It wasn't her beauty, though she was striking. No, there was something in her composure, something that caught his attention. But he quickly dismissed it, returning to his phone. That was when he noticed her approach. Christina walked over to his table with a glass of water, her movements swift and practiced. "Good evening, sir. Would you like to place your order while you wait for your guest?" she asked, her voice calm and neutral. Jack looked up at her, irritation flickering in his eyes. "I'm still waiting for my date. I'll order when she arrives," he replied curtly. But as he returned to his phone, he couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. He glanced back at Christina, who was already moving to the next table, and then his gaze fell to her hands as she walked. He noticed the small pendant hanging from her neck. For a moment, it caught the light, and Jack froze. The pendant was familiar, very familiar. It was identical to one he had given his late wife, Emily, years ago. He hadn't seen the pendant in ages, not since the day Emily had passed. The realization hit him like a ton of bricks. He needed to know more. After a few moments of internal hesitation, he called out to Christina. "Wait," he said, his voice firm but not unkind. Christina turned, raising an eyebrow in silent inquiry. "That pendant, where did you get it?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper, as though afraid the question might shatter something fragile. Christina's hand instinctively went to her neck, where the pendant rested. "It's a family heirloom," she explained, her expression unreadable. Jack's mind raced. "Family heirloom," he repeated, his heart pounding in his chest. "Yes," Christina replied. "It's been passed down for generations in my family." Jack leaned back in his chair, still staring at her, his thoughts spinning. He had to know more. There was something about her, something about the pendant, that felt like fate had brought them together. But for now, he decided to bide his time. The evening was just beginning, and he wasn't ready to reveal what he suspected. He watched as Christina walked away, a million questions swirling in his mind. Could she be related to Emily in some way? Was this just a coincidence, or was there something more to it? Jack had no idea, but he knew one thing for certain. He wasn't going to let this mystery slip through his fingers. Tonight, everything was about to change. As the evening carried on, Jack sat in silence, his mind still racing with the discovery of the pendant. His gaze kept drifting back to Christina, who moved effortlessly around the restaurant, serving her customers with a practiced grace. But it wasn't her poise that caught his attention anymore. It was the pendant, the identical one to the one he had given Emily, the love of his life, so many years ago. Jack could feel the weight of the memory press on him, as if the pendant were a bridge between the past and the present, pulling him back to a time he'd tried so hard to bury. The night was quiet, but his mind was anything but. Every time Christina passed by, he felt a strange tug in his chest, an unease that he couldn't quite explain. She was just a waitress. But the pendant, Emily's pendant, was no coincidence. He had to find out more. He watched as Christina disappeared into the kitchen, her figure swallowed by the bustling restaurant. He leaned forward, his eyes narrowing as he replayed the brief conversation in his head. "It's a family heirloom," she had said. But Jack wasn't convinced. There was something deeper, something more personal about that pendant. It wasn't just an heirloom. He had seen that design, those initials, etched into the pendant years ago when he had first given it to Emily. He pushed his thoughts aside for the moment. He was a man of action, not contemplation. And if there was one thing Jack Anderson could do well, it was getting answers. After a few moments, he stood up, his chair scraping against the floor as he made his way to the back of the restaurant. The kitchen was a flurry of activity, with chefs shouting orders and waitstaff rushing in and out. Christina was bent over a counter, inspecting a tray of freshly prepared dishes. He took a deep breath before stepping toward her. "Christina," he said, his voice calm but steady. She looked up, startled to see him standing there, but her expression quickly returned to one of professionalism. "Yes, Mr. Anderson?" she asked. He hesitated for a moment before speaking. "I need to know more about that pendant," he said, his tone not as commanding as it had been earlier, but still with an underlying urgency. Christina's face froze for just a second, her eyes darting to the pendant around her neck. "I told you, it's a family heirloom," she replied, but there was a slight tremor in her voice. Jack's gaze softened, but he wasn't about to back down. "I know, but I need you to understand why I'm asking. That pendant, it's identical to one I gave to my late wife." The initials. He didn't finish the sentence, but Christina's face paled slightly. She glanced down at the pendant again, as if trying to collect her thoughts. "It's just a coincidence," she said quickly, but Jack could see the unease in her eyes. "I don't think so," he replied, his voice steady. "I think there's more to this than you're letting on, and I won't stop until I get to the bottom of it." Christina stood there, her hands shaking slightly as she fidgeted with the pendant. The weight of his words hung in the air between them. She opened her mouth to say something but then closed it, as if debating whether to tell him the truth. Finally, she sighed and looked up at him. "I didn't want to say anything," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I think you deserve to know." Jack leaned in slightly, his heart pounding in his chest. This was it. He could feel it. "What is it?" he asked, almost breathless. Christina took a deep breath before speaking. "I'm not just some waitress," she began, her eyes flickering with a mix of fear and resolve. "That pendant, it was given to me by my mother. And she told me that it had been passed down for generations in our family. But I never knew the full story. Not until now." Jack's mind raced as he processed her words. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice a little more urgent. Christina hesitated for a moment, then pulled the pendant off her neck and handed it to him. Jack took it in his hands, his fingers trembling slightly as he examined it more closely. The initials were exactly the same, M.A. It was Emily's pendant, but it didn't make sense. How could Christina have it? Was this some twisted coincidence, or was there something more? Christina stepped back, her voice breaking slightly. "I've never been sure, but I think I'm connected to your family in some way. My mother, she told me once that our families were intertwined. But after she passed away, I couldn't find any answers. Now, I think I've found the one thing that could explain it all." Jack's mind was reeling, but he couldn't deny the pull he felt toward Christina. This wasn't just a case of fate. This was something deeper, something he needed to understand. As he stared at the pendant in his hand, he realized that everything he had known, everything he thought he understood about his past, was about to change. He was no longer just a CEO. He was a man on the brink of uncovering a truth that could shatter everything he had built. "What are you saying?" Jack asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Christina looked at him, her eyes full of emotion. "I think I'm your daughter," she said softly. Christina's words hung in the air like a heavy fog, and Jack stood there, gripping the pendant as though it might shatter at any moment. His mind raced, trying to piece together the fragments of her revelation. "I think I'm your daughter." The words echoed in his head, but no matter how many times he replayed them, they didn't make sense. He glanced down at the pendant again, feeling a strange, almost supernatural connection to it. This was his late wife's gift, the one he had given her years ago, and now Christina was telling him it was part of her family, too. Was she really his daughter? Could it be true? He had to know, but the question burned in his chest. "How?" he finally managed to ask, his voice hoarse. Christina bit her lip, clearly struggling with the weight of her own confession. I don't have all the answers, she said softly. But my mother, she used to tell me stories about a man who could be my father. She said our families were connected in some way, but after she passed away, I couldn't find anything to prove it. Jack's heart pounded. He had lost his wife, Emily, years ago in a tragic accident. He thought he had buried that part of his life deep in the past. He had moved on, built his empire, but now this. His world was crashing down around him. You think you're my daughter, he repeated, as though saying it aloud might make it more real. I think so, Christina said quietly, her voice trembling. I've always wondered, but I never had the courage to find out. Until now. Jack was silent for a long moment, staring at the pendant in his hand, the initials M.A. carved into it. It matched his late wife's initials. Was this some kind of twisted fate? He had built his life around control and logic, but here he was, facing the possibility that he had a daughter he had never known about. He looked at Christina, his mind racing, with a million questions. If you're really my daughter, then why haven't you told me sooner? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Christina looked down at the floor, her eyes welling up with unshed tears. I didn't know how, she said, her voice breaking. I didn't want to intrude on your life. You have your own world, your own family, and I didn't want to be a burden. But the pendant, it's the only link I have to the truth. Jack's heart softened. He had been so caught up in his own world, so absorbed in his work and success, that he hadn't stopped to question the things that truly mattered. And now, standing before him was a woman who might be his daughter, a person who had been living a life he knew nothing about. The thought made him feel both guilty and relieved. Christina, he said gently, his hand reaching out to her. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make you feel like you didn't matter. But if you're telling me the truth, then we have to find out together. We need to understand what happened, and I need to know who you really are. Christina's eyes locked with his, and for the first time, she seemed to believe him. The uncertainty that had plagued her expression melted away, replaced by a glimmer of hope. You believe me? She asked, almost incredulously. Jack nodded, his expression serious. I have no reason not to. He took a deep breath, still processing the enormity of what she had just told him. This wasn't just a coincidence. There was something bigger at play here, something that had been hidden for years. And now, it was time to uncover the truth. We'll figure this out, Christina, he said, his voice firm. We'll get answers, and we'll find out what this all means. But first, we need to take a step back. He paused, letting the gravity of the situation sink in. I think it's time we get a DNA test. Christina looked at him, stunned. A DNA test? She echoed, her voice shaky. Jack nodded. Yes, we need to confirm it. And once we do, we can start making sense of everything. Christina hesitated, then nodded, as if the idea of confirmation brought her some relief. She had always wondered about her past, about the man who might be her father. And now, the truth was within reach. But she knew it wouldn't be easy. Jack stood, the pendant still in his hand. I'll arrange it, he said. But Christina, I want you to know one thing. No matter what the test says, I'll be here for you. You're not alone in this. The sincerity in his voice struck her like a bolt of lightning. For the first time, she felt as though she had found a place to belong. And no matter how complicated this journey would be, she wouldn't have to face it alone. Jack had always been a man who controlled everything. But now, he was beginning to understand that the most important things in life couldn't be controlled. Family, love, and the truth were not things he could dictate. They were things that had to be discovered, no matter how painful or shocking the process might be. He glanced at Christina, who was standing there with uncertainty in her eyes. He knew they were about to embark on a journey neither of them could predict, but for the first time in a long while, Jack felt something he hadn't felt in years, hope. And no matter what the future held, they would face it together. The following day, Jack arranged for the DNA test. It wasn't something he ever imagined he'd be doing, but there was no turning back now. The reality of what Christina had said still hung in the air, undeniable but overwhelming. He'd been through countless board meetings, financial reports, and hostile takeovers, but none of those challenges seemed to hold the weight of this. Finding out if Christina was truly his daughter was something far bigger than any business deal. As the morning sun poured through the windows of his penthouse, Jack paced back and forth, his thoughts a jumbled mess. Christina was at home, waiting for the test results. They had agreed to meet after the procedure to wait for the results together. The thought of meeting his potential daughter made his heart race, but it also filled him with a deep sense of uncertainty. Would she really be his daughter? Or was this all a mistake, some cruel twist of fate? At the testing center, Jack was met with the cold, sterile environment he was all too familiar with. Clinical white walls, the faint smell of antiseptic, and the hum of fluorescent lights above. He hated the place, but it didn't matter. He was here for answers. Christina sat across from him, her hands clenched together in her lap. She looked more vulnerable than Jack had ever seen her, and for the first time, he truly understood how much this moment meant to her. She wasn't just a waitress. She wasn't just a woman with a family heirloom. She was someone who had been searching for answers, just like him. As they waited in the sterile room, Jack found himself at a loss for words. The silence between them felt heavy, and yet, it was strangely comforting. Neither of them knew what the outcome of the test would be, but in that moment, they were connected by something deeper than blood. The door opened, and a nurse stepped in, holding a clipboard in her hands. She looked between them and smiled warmly. "Are you both ready for the results?" Jack's heart skipped a beat. "Yes," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Christina nodded, her gaze never leaving the nurse. The nurse glanced down at the clipboard and then back at them. "The results are in. According to the test, the probability that you are father and daughter is 99.9%. The words hit Jack like a freight train. 99.9%. The confirmation he had been waiting for. The world around him seemed to blur as his mind tried to process what had just been said. He looked at Christina, who was staring at the nurse in disbelief. She had her hand over her mouth, as though she couldn't believe it was real. The nurse smiled again. "Congratulations. You two are indeed related." Jack didn't know how to react. A mixture of relief, confusion, and something else entirely washed over him. He stood up slowly, his legs feeling like they might give out beneath him. The world had just shifted, and he was unsure of how to find his place in it. Christina stood too, but she didn't move toward him. She stood frozen, as if the news was too much for her to take in all at once. I don't know what to say," she whispered, her voice shaky. Jack looked at her, his emotions catching in his throat. "You don't have to say anything," he said softly. "We don't need to rush this. We'll take it one step at a time." Christina finally met his gaze, and for the first time since they'd met, Jack saw something in her eyes he hadn't expected: trust. There was so much more to this than just the DNA test. This was about two people who had been unknowingly connected for years, a bond that neither of them could have predicted. "I don't know how to be a father," Jack admitted, his voice quiet. "But I'll figure it out. For you. For us." Christina gave him a tentative smile, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "I don't know what to expect either," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "But I'm willing to try." Jack nodded, his chest tight. He didn't know where to go from here, or what kind of relationship they would have moving forward. But he knew one thing for certain. He couldn't turn his back on her now. "Let's start slow," he said, his voice steady. "We have time to figure it out. We're family now." Christina looked down at the floor, as if processing his words. She nodded, a small but genuine smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "I think I'd like that," she said quietly. The nurse handed them both a small piece of paper with the official results and a list of next steps. As she left the room, Jack and Christina were left alone with their newfound truth. They were father and daughter. It wasn't the way he had ever imagined meeting his child, but it was real. The weight of it settled over him like a heavy blanket. But it wasn't an unpleasant feeling. There was something about it that felt right. They were family now, and that was all that mattered. The days that followed were a whirlwind. Jack and Christina met regularly, each time trying to understand what this new reality meant for both of them. The results of the DNA test had confirmed what Christina had suspected for so long, but now the challenge was navigating the space between them. For Jack, it was a struggle. He had built his life around success and control, but nothing could prepare him for the responsibility of fatherhood, especially not in such an unexpected way. Each time he looked at Christina, there was a sense of both awe and guilt. A part of him felt like he had missed out on so much of her life. A part of him felt like he had failed her before he had even known she existed. But there was also hope. Something deep inside him told him that this was his second chance, a chance to make things right. He had spent so many years focused on building his empire, but now, Christina was a new priority. For Christina, the truth was just as complicated. She had spent so long wondering about her father, about who he was, where he was, and why he had never been a part of her life. Now that she had him, everything felt overwhelming. She wasn't sure what kind of father Jack would be. Could he be the man she had imagined all these years? Could he be someone who would step up and be there for her? Or was this all just a dream that would eventually fade away? The first few days were filled with awkward conversations and tentative steps. They didn't know each other, not really. Christina had grown up with just her mother, and Jack had spent years alone, immersed in work. But slowly, they began to find common ground. One evening, after a long dinner at a quiet restaurant in the city, Jack finally spoke what had been on his mind for days. "Christina, I know I can't make up for lost time," he said, his voice soft but firm. "But I want to try. I don't know what it looks like yet, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes to be the father you need." Christina looked at him, her face unreadable for a moment. Then, her lips curved into a small smile. "I don't need perfection," she said quietly. "I just need someone who will be there, who won't give up." Jack felt a weight lift off his chest. It wasn't much, but it was enough. "I'm here," he said, "and I'm not going anywhere." Over the next few weeks, they spent more time together. It wasn't always easy, but they made progress. Jack took her to some of the places he frequented, including his office in the city. Christina had never seen the world Jack lived in, and it took her breath away. The sleek glass buildings, the expensive cars, the constant hum of business. It was a far cry from the life she had known. But, as they toured his office, Jack seemed different. He wasn't the cold, distant businessman she had assumed he was. There was warmth in his eyes when he looked at her, a softness that had been absent in their first meetings. He wasn't just a CEO, he was a father trying to figure it out, just like she was. One afternoon, while sitting in his office, Christina looked at him and asked, "What was it like when you lost her?" Jack's expression softened, and he leaned back in his chair, looking out the window. "It was the hardest thing I've ever been through," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't know how to live without her. It felt like the world had stopped turning." Christina nodded, understanding more than he knew. "I can't imagine what that must have been like," she said. Jack turned to face her, his eyes serious. "It's something I've carried with me all these years. But I don't want to live in the past anymore. I have you now, and I want to be here for you, no matter what." Christina felt her heart swell. It wasn't the fairy tale she had imagined when she was younger, but it was real. She could see the sincerity in his eyes. He wasn't perfect, but he was trying, and that meant more than anything. Over time, their bond grew. Jack slowly let go of his need for control, and Christina began to open up about her life, her dreams, her fears. They weren't just father and daughter. They were becoming friends. Jack took her to family events, introducing her to people in his circle, and though it was still a little awkward, Christina felt the warmth of belonging. For the first time in her life, she wasn't alone. She had someone who cared, someone who was willing to take the time to learn about her, to understand her. And for Jack, it was a revelation. He had spent so many years building an empire, but now, the most important thing in his life was this woman sitting across from him, the daughter he never knew he had. He was slowly beginning to realize that family wasn't something to be built with money or power. It was built with time, effort, and love. As the weeks passed, Jack and Christina started to develop their own routine. There were still moments of uncertainty, but they were no longer the center of their relationship. Instead, they focused on what they could build together. They didn't need to rush. They didn't need to be perfect. They just needed each other. Weeks passed, and while Jack and Christina were still adjusting to their new reality, something inside them began to shift. The awkwardness that had initially marked their relationship started to fade, replaced by a quiet understanding. Jack had always been a man of action, but fatherhood was a new territory, one where there were no clear rules or strategies to follow. Still, he was trying. And Christina, too, was adjusting. She had spent her entire life without a father, but now she was learning to trust Jack, to believe that this wasn't some fleeting moment, but something real. They spent more time together, getting to know each other not as strangers, but as family. One Saturday afternoon, Jack decided to take Christina to the place that had been the center of his world for years, his childhood home. It was an old house on the outskirts of the city, a place filled with memories of his parents, of his childhood. He hadn't been back in years. It had been too painful. But now, with Christina by his side, He felt it was time to share a piece of himself with her. The drive was quiet, the city's noise slowly fading into the distance as they headed out of town. Christina sat beside him in the car, her eyes focused on the passing landscape. "You've never mentioned much about your family," Christina said after a while, her voice soft. "What was it like growing up?" Jack glanced at her, then back at the road ahead. It was a question he hadn't expected, but one he was ready to answer now. "It was complicated," he said, his voice low. "My parents were older when they had me. My dad was a workaholic, just like me. And my mom—" He paused, remembering. She was the heart of the family. She kept things together when everything felt like it was falling apart. She was the one who made sure I knew what really mattered. Christina listened quietly, sensing the weight behind his words. Jack had never opened up about his past before, and for the first time, she realized that there was more to him than the confident, successful CEO she had met. They reached the house, and Jack parked in front of the large, ivy-covered building. It looked just as he remembered, faded, with years of wear and tear, but still standing strong. He stepped out of the car and walked to the front door, his heart pounding. Christina followed him, unsure of what to expect. As Jack unlocked the door, memories flooded his mind. The laughter, the arguments, the quiet moments with his mother, the long hours spent trying to get his father's approval. The house was just as he remembered, filled with old furniture and dusty bookshelves. It felt like stepping into the past, but with Christina beside him, it was different. "This is where I grew up," Jack said quietly, motioning to the house. "It's where I learned everything I know." Christina nodded, taking in the surroundings. "It's beautiful," she said, her voice filled with awe. They walked through the house, Jack showing Christina the old family photos on the walls, pointing out the places where he had spent his childhood. "This is the room I used to study in," he said, opening a door to reveal a small study filled with old books and papers. "My dad spent a lot of time here. I used to sneak in and read when I was supposed to be studying." Christina smiled, seeing the nostalgia in his eyes. It was a side of Jack she had never seen before, the vulnerable side. The side of him that wasn't just about business and success. As they continued their tour of the house, Jack's phone buzzed in his pocket. He checked it quickly, his expression darkening as he read the message. "What is it?" Christina asked, noticing his sudden shift in mood. "It's work," Jack replied, his tone tight. "I've been trying to avoid it, but it's one of those things that won't wait." Christina could tell he was conflicted, torn between the past and the present. "Maybe you should take the call," she said gently. "I'll wait here." Jack hesitated, then nodded. He stepped outside to take the call, leaving Christina standing in the quiet house, taking it all in. As she stood there, looking at the familiar photos of Jack's family, she couldn't help but feel a sense of loss. Not just for the family Jack had lost, but for her own family that never was. She had always dreamed of having a father figure in her life, someone who would be there for her. Now that she had him, she didn't want to mess it up. But she also knew that she had to let go of the past. The world had changed. Jack had changed. And now, they had a chance to build something together. When Jack returned, his face was serious, but there was a softness in his eyes. "Sorry about that," he said. "Work's never done." Christina smiled, understanding. "It's okay," she replied. "We all have our responsibilities." They walked out of the house together, the sun beginning to set on the horizon. As they drove back to the city, Jack felt a sense of peace he hadn't experienced in a long time. He was starting to realize that family wasn't just about blood or the past. It was about what you chose to build in the present. And with Christina by his side, he felt like he was finally on the right path. There were still challenges ahead, but they didn't seem as daunting anymore. Together, they could face anything. And for the first time in years, Jack felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be. As the days went on, Jack and Christina began to build a routine, one that was steadily becoming more natural. The awkwardness that had once defined their interactions was slowly being replaced by something more comfortable. They still had a long way to go, but they were getting there. Jack had always thought that family was a matter of status, of titles, and wealth. But as he spent more time with Christina, he realized it was so much more. It was about connection, understanding, and the quiet moments that made everything else worthwhile. One evening, after a long day of work, Jack invited Christina to dinner at one of his favorite spots, a small, upscale Italian restaurant near the edge of the city. It was the kind of place that felt like home, with low lighting, cozy tables, and the scent of freshly baked bread in the air. It had always been his escape from the chaos of his life, a place where he could slow down for just a moment. He figured it would be the perfect setting for a conversation that had been long overdue. Christina arrived at the restaurant, dressed in a simple black dress that highlighted the warmth of her smile. Jack had never noticed how beautiful she was before. He had always seen her as just a waitress, a worker in his world. But now, sitting across from her in the intimate setting, he realized that there was so much more to her. They ordered their meals, and the conversation began to flow naturally. For once, it wasn't about business or the past. It was about the two of them getting to know each other. As they ate, Jack found himself asking questions about her life, her dreams, her hopes. Christina opened up, speaking more freely than she ever had before. She shared stories of her childhood, the struggles she had faced growing up without a father, and how she had always wondered about him. She spoke about her mother, who had been her rock through everything. Jack listened intently, his heart heavy with emotion. He couldn't imagine what it must have been like for her to grow up with so many unanswered questions. He wanted to make up for the lost years, but he also knew that it wasn't something that could be fixed overnight. As the evening wore on, they talked about everything and nothing. They laughed, they shared quiet moments, and for the first time, Jack felt like he was truly seeing Christina for who she was. She wasn't just his daughter. She was a woman with her own life, her own experiences, and her own dreams. And that realization made him feel something he hadn't felt in years: pride. When they finished dinner, Jack walked Christina out to the car, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. He didn't say anything at first, just enjoying the silence between them. "You know," he said finally, "I never thought I'd be here, doing this. I never thought I'd be a father. But I'm glad I am." Christina looked up at him, a smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "I'm glad too," she said softly. "I never imagined this either." As Jack watched her drive away, a sense of peace settled over him. He didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, he wasn't afraid of it. They had made it this far, and that was enough. They still had a lot to learn about each other, but Jack knew one thing for certain. He wasn't going to let her go. Over the next few weeks, their bond continued to strengthen. Jack made an effort to spend more time with Christina, inviting her to business meetings, dinners, and even weekend outings. He wanted to make up for lost time, but he also knew that their relationship needed to be built on more than just shared experiences. It needed to be built on trust, respect, and mutual understanding. One Saturday afternoon, they went for a walk in the park, just the two of them. The air was crisp and cool, and the golden leaves of autumn crunched beneath their feet. As they walked side by side, Jack found himself reflecting on the past few months. It had been a whirlwind, but it had also been the most rewarding time of his life. "I've been thinking," Jack said after a while, "about everything, about how much I've missed. And I'm sorry, Christina. I'm sorry I wasn't there for you." Christina looked at him, her expression soft. "You don't have to apologize," she said gently. "We're here now, and that's what matters." Jack smiled, the weight in his chest easing. She was right. They couldn't change the past, but they could shape their future together. And that was enough. As they reached the end of the park, Jack took a deep breath and turned to Christina. "I want you to know something," he said. "I know we still have a long way to go, but I'm committed to making this work. Whatever it takes, I'm here." Christina smiled, her eyes bright with emotion. "I'm here too," she said. "We'll figure it out together." Jack nodded, his heart swelling with a sense of pride and hope he had never known before. For the first time, he didn't feel like he was just surviving. He was living, truly living, and for the first time in his life, he was doing it with the people who mattered most. His daughter, Christina. They didn't need to have everything figured out. They didn't need to be perfect. They just needed each other, and that was enough. As the weeks turned into months, Jack and Christina's relationship continued to evolve. What began as an awkward, uncertain connection had slowly transformed into something more solid, more real. They had learned to navigate the complexities of being father and daughter, and though the road was not always smooth, it was theirs too. Walk together. Jack's days were filled with meetings, business trips, and the constant pressure of running his empire. But no matter how busy he became, he made time for Christina. He was committed to being there for her, and he could see that she was beginning to trust him more with each passing day. Christina, on the other hand, was adjusting to the idea of having a father in her life. She had spent so many years without him, without the sense of family she had longed for. But now she was learning what it meant to have a connection with someone who truly cared. It wasn't easy. There were still moments of doubt and hesitation on both sides, but they were getting there. One evening, after a long week of work, Jack decided to take Christina out for dinner at a quiet, cozy bistro he loved. It was a place where they could talk, where the world felt a little smaller, a little less overwhelming. As they sat across from each other, sipping their wine and discussing everything from work to Christina's favorite books, Jack couldn't help but notice how much more comfortable they both were. They weren't just going through the motions anymore. They were really starting to connect. "I've been thinking about something," Jack said, setting down his glass. Christina looked up at him, her brow furrowing slightly in curiosity. "What is it?" she asked. Jack took a deep breath, trying to find the right words. "It's about your future," he began. "I know we haven't talked much about it, but I want you to know that I'm here to help. If you want to go back to school or pursue something you're passionate about, I'll support you." Christina was silent for a moment, processing his words. She had always dreamed of going back to school, of finishing her degree and pursuing a career that meant something to her. But the financial burden had always felt insurmountable. Her mother had done everything she could to support her, but there had never been enough. Now, with Jack offering help, the possibility seemed real for the first time. "I don't know what to say," Christina replied, her voice thick with emotion. "I've always wanted to finish my degree, but I never thought I could afford it." Jack reached across the table, his hand resting gently on hers. "You don't have to worry about that anymore," he said softly. "I want you to have the opportunities one never had growing up. I know it won't be easy, but I believe in you, and I'm here to help, every step of the way." Christina's eyes filled with tears, and for a moment, she couldn't speak. The weight of his words, the depth of his sincerity, left her breathless. She had never imagined that someone, especially a father she had just met, would offer her this kind of support. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I don't know what I did to deserve this, but thank you." Jack smiled, his heart swelling with pride. "You don't have to do anything to deserve it, Christina. You're my daughter, and that's all that matters." The rest of the evening passed in a comfortable silence, the kind that only comes when two people truly understand each other. They didn't need words to fill the space between them. They were simply content in each other's presence. Later that night, as Jack drove Christina home, he felt a sense of fulfillment he hadn't known in years. The road ahead wasn't going to be easy, but they would face it together. He knew that now. As they reached Christina's apartment, she turned to him, her expression serious. "I've been thinking about something too," she said, her voice steady. Jack looked at her, waiting for her to continue. "I know we've made progress, but I still don't know everything about you, Dad," she said quietly. "I still don't know the full story. About your life, your past. I think it's time you told me." Jack's heart tightened at the thought. There were so many parts of his past he had buried, so many things he had never shared with anyone. But Christina was different. She deserved the truth. "I'll tell you," he said softly. "But not tonight. I think we both need some time." Christina nodded, understanding. "I'm not going anywhere," she said, her smile reassuring. "Whenever you're ready." As she stepped out of the car, Jack watched her disappear into the building, a sense of warmth filling his chest. It wasn't just about the money, the support, or the promises. It was about being there for each other. They had made it through so much already, and there was so much more to come. Jack knew one thing for sure, no matter what happened next, he wasn't going to let go of this newfound family. They were stronger than anything life could throw at them. And together, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead. As the days went by, Jack and Christina's relationship began to deepen in ways neither of them could have predicted. The truth about their connection had been revealed, and with it, the weight of everything they had missed. But instead of pulling them apart, it had drawn them closer. Christina had spent her whole life without a father, and now, she was learning what it meant to have one. For Jack, every moment spent with her felt like both a gift and a challenge. He had spent years living in a world of business deals, numbers, and board meetings, but fatherhood was a whole new arena. And though it was difficult at times, it was also more fulfilling than any deal he had ever closed. One evening, as they sat in his office, Jack looked at Christina across the desk. She had been working alongside him more often, helping with his business in a way that he never expected. It was surprising how quickly she had adapted to this new world. "You know," Jack said, his voice steady, "I never thought I'd find myself here, sharing my life with someone who means so much to me. I've built an empire, but now I realize it's not what defines me." Christina looked up from the papers she was reviewing, her eyes thoughtful. "I think you've always known that," she said. "You just needed to realize it for yourself." Jack smiled, feeling a sense of pride. Christina had always been more insightful than he gave her credit for. She had her mother's strength, her mother's wisdom, and now he could see that she had a little of his determination too. "Maybe so," Jack said, "but I've never had anyone I could truly call family, not like this. You're more than just a daughter to me, Christina. You're a part of who I am." Christina's eyes softened at his words, and for the first time, she could see the man who had been hidden behind the mask of success for so long. He wasn't perfect, but he was trying, and for her, that was more than enough. "I feel the same way," she said quietly. "It's like we're building something together. Something I never thought would happen." Jack nodded. "We are. And I want you to know that no matter what happens, I'll always be here. This isn't just about blood. It's about being there for each other when it matters most." Christina's smile was small but genuine. "I believe you," she said, and there was a quiet strength in her voice that reassured Jack. But even as they found new ground, there was still the lingering question of the past. There was a reason Jack had been so distant for so long, and it wasn't something he could easily forget. The loss of his wife had been the hardest thing he'd ever faced, and for years he had buried his feelings deep inside, thinking that burying the pain would make it go away. But now, with Christina in his life, he realized that the pain wasn't something to hide, it was something to heal. "Christina," Jack said after a pause, "I owe you more than an explanation. You deserve to know what happened, and why I've been the way I've been." Christina looked up at him, her expression soft and understanding. "You don't have to explain everything," she said. "But if you want to, I'm here to listen." Jack took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the past settle over him. "I lost Emily, my wife, years ago. It was sudden, unexpected. She was everything to me, and when she was gone, I didn't know how to move on. I built this empire to keep my mind occupied, to avoid feeling the emptiness." He paused, the words feeling like lead in his chest. "I never allowed myself to grieve properly. I buried everything, my emotions, my hopes, my family. But when I met you, Christina, it felt like everything changed. I didn't expect to find you, and I didn't expect to find this connection. But here you are." Christina was silent for a moment, processing what he had said. "I can't imagine how hard that must have been," she said softly. "But you're not alone anymore. I'm here, and I want to help you, just like you're helping me." Jack felt a sense of relief wash over him. For the first time in years, he felt like he was finally facing his past, not running from it. "Thank you," he said quietly. "I don't know what the future holds, but I do know that I want to face it with you." Christina smiled, her eyes bright with the promise of new beginnings. "We'll figure it out," she said. Together. As they sat there in the quiet of the office, Jack realized that this was what it meant to have a family. Not just the blood ties, but the people who were there for you when everything else fell apart. Christina was no longer just his daughter by chance. She was his family, and he was determined to make up for the time they had lost. Together, they could face whatever came next, and for the first time in a long time, Jack was ready to live for something more than just his business. He was ready to live for her. And for the first time, he knew that this journey was just beginning. As the months passed, Jack and Christina's bond continued to grow stronger, but with every step forward, there were still moments of uncertainty. They had both come a long way, but their relationship, still in its early stages, was a delicate balance of the past, the present, and the future. For Jack, it wasn't just about being a father now. It was about learning to be the kind of father Christina deserved. And for Christina, it wasn't just about finding the father she had always dreamed of. It was about understanding that the man she had found was flawed, like everyone else, but capable of something that no one had ever shown her before: unconditional love. One afternoon, Jack invited Christina to his office for lunch. The day was busy, but he made a point to carve out a break, hoping to spend time with her outside of the work environment. As they sat across from each other in the conference room, Jack looked at Christina with a sense of pride. She had become more than just his daughter. She was his confidant, his partner in so many ways. How are you feeling about everything? Jack asked, watching her intently. Christina paused, looking out the window at the city skyline before meeting his gaze. I'm doing okay, she replied, her voice steady. I'm just still trying to figure everything out. I never thought I'd have this kind of relationship with you. It's overwhelming sometimes. Jack nodded, understanding the complexity of their situation. I get it, he said softly. I feel the same way. But I want you to know that I'm here, no matter what. You don't have to figure it all out right away. Christina smiled, but there was a hint of sadness in her eyes. It's just hard, she admitted. I've spent my whole life without you, and now, even though you're here, it feels like there's so much I don't know about you. About your life, your past. Jack took a deep breath. He had always kept his personal life separate from his work life, but now, with Christina, he knew he couldn't keep hiding. There's a lot I haven't told you, he began, his voice quiet. A lot I thought I could forget, but I can't hide from it anymore. And I want you to know the truth. I want you to know who I really am. Christina looked at him, her expression soft but inquisitive. What do you mean? She asked. Jack hesitated, his mind racing. It wasn't just about his wife, Emily. It wasn't just about the years he had spent burying his grief and focusing on work. It was about his fears, his regrets, and the parts of himself he had never shared with anyone. I've made mistakes, he said finally. I've spent too many years pushing people away, thinking that if I just worked harder, I could outrun my problems. But that's not how life works. And it's certainly not how family works. Christina listened intently, her eyes never leaving his face. I've spent so much time running from my past, from my emotions, Jack continued. But now I'm realizing that I don't have to do that anymore. I don't have to be perfect. I just have to show up. And I want to show up for you. There was a long silence between them, the weight of his words sinking in. Christina felt her heart soften. She had spent so many years wondering if she would ever have the kind of relationship with her father that she had seen in other families. She had imagined what it would be like, but now, facing the reality of it, she saw how complicated it truly was. But she also saw something else, a man who was trying, really trying, to be the father she needed. I don't need you to be perfect, Dad, Christina said, her voice full of emotion. I just need you to be here, and that's more than enough. Jack felt a wave of relief wash over him. He had feared that Christina would reject him, that he would fail her in the same way he had failed himself. But her words were a reminder that family wasn't about perfection. It was about effort and love. You have no idea how much that means to me, Jack said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. I'm here, Christina. I'm not going anywhere. The conversation shifted to lighter topics as they finished their lunch, but Jack couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. They had crossed a threshold, and no matter what came next, they were in this together. Later that evening, as they wrapped up their day, Jack received a call from his business partner about a deal that had been in the works for weeks. It was a high-stakes negotiation, one that could change the trajectory of his company. The moment he picked up the phone, Christina looked at him, sensing the shift in his focus. You've got a call, don't you? She asked, her tone knowing. Jack nodded, a brief moment of regret passing over him. I do, he said. But I want you to know, no matter what happens with this deal, I'm not going to let it come between us. Christina smiled, a little laugh escaping her lips. I know, Dad. And that's all I need to hear. As Jack turned his attention to the call, he realized something. For the first time in years, he didn't feel the pressure to be everything for everyone. He didn't have to be the perfect businessman, the perfect father. He just had to be himself. And for the first time in his life, that felt like enough. Weeks passed, and as the days turned into months, Jack and Christina continued to build their relationship, now stronger and more stable than ever. They still faced moments of doubt and challenges, but they had learned to navigate the complexity of being father and daughter. Jack had been used to being in control of his world, whether it was in business or his personal life, but now he had to learn to share that control. And Christina, having spent years without a father, was learning to trust someone who had been a stranger to her for so long. But every time they connected, every moment they spent together, Christina felt that they were slowly closing the gap. One Saturday afternoon, Jack decided to take Christina on a trip outside the city. He knew she had always wanted to see the countryside, to get away from the busy, sometimes suffocating life they had in Manhattan. He booked a small cottage in the mountains, a quiet retreat away from the chaos of the city. When they arrived, Christina's eyes lit up with excitement. The cabin was quaint, surrounded by trees and a peaceful lake. It felt like a different world entirely, one that Jack hadn't experienced in years. "This is amazing," Christina said, taking in the fresh mountain air. "I can't believe you planned all of this." Jack smiled, feeling a sense of fulfillment in doing something for her. "I wanted to show you that there's more to life than just work and deadlines," he said. "You deserve peace. You deserve moments like this." They spent the weekend hiking, talking, and enjoying the tranquility of the mountains. It was a chance for them to bond in a way they hadn't before, free from distractions and expectations. As the sun set one evening, they sat outside on the porch, watching the colors of the sky change. The lake reflected the pinks and oranges, creating a sense of calm. "You know," Christina said after a long silence, "I've been thinking a lot about the past few months." Jack turned to look at her, his heart tightening slightly. He knew where this was headed, but he was ready. "I know it hasn't been easy for either of us," he said. "We've both had to adjust, to make room for something new in our lives." Christina nodded, her eyes focused on the water. "It's not just about us being father and daughter," she said softly. "It's about learning how to be a family. A real family." Jack felt a lump form in his throat at her words. "I know," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. "And I'm committed to making this work. For you, for us. I've missed so much of your life already, but I'm here now. And I'm not going anywhere." Christina looked at him, her eyes reflecting the sincerity in his words. "I never thought I would have this," she said. "A father who actually cares, who is actually here." Jack reached over and gently took her hand. "You don't have to thank me," he said quietly. "I'm just glad we're finally getting the chance to make this work." The conversation shifted as they talked about their hopes for the future. Christina was beginning to consider her next steps in life, wondering what path to take now that the possibility of higher education seemed more real than ever. Jack encouraged her to pursue her dreams, no matter where they took her. He told her that she could do anything she set her mind to, and he would support her every step of the way. As the weekend came to a close, and they made their way back to the city, Christina felt a sense of peace she had never experienced before. She no longer felt like an outsider in her own life. Jack had become not just her father, but a source of strength, of hope. And as they drove through the winding roads back to Manhattan, she realized that the life she had always dreamed of was finally within reach. But even more than that, she had something she had never truly expected: family. Jack, too, felt a change in himself. The man who had once been so focused on building his empire, on his career, was now seeing the importance of connection. He had spent too many years keeping people at arm's length, thinking that success and power were the only things that mattered. But now, with Christina in his life, he understood that there was more to living than just business. There was love, there was family, and he was going to make sure that, no matter what, he didn't take that for granted. As they returned to the city, the streets felt less overwhelming. The noise of the city wasn't as suffocating as it had once been. Jack and Christina had learned to carve out their own space in the world, one where they could be who they were without the pressures of the past hanging over them. They were a family now, and that was enough. Jack smiled as he looked at Christina, who was gazing out the window, lost in thought. He could see the future in her eyes, the possibilities, the potential. And for the first time, he truly felt like he was ready to face whatever came next, not as a businessman, not as a father alone, but as part of something bigger, a family. The weeks following their trip to the countryside were filled with a sense of new beginnings for Jack and Christina. They had found a rhythm, a balance, between their work lives and their personal lives. Jack's office had become a place where Christina was more than just a visitor. She was a valued member of the team. Whether it was sitting in on meetings or helping him with the endless paperwork that came with running a company, she had seamlessly become a part of his world. Christina, for her part, had never imagined she would find herself so involved in the business side of things. She had always seen herself as someone on the outside, someone who could only dream of being a part of the high-powered world her father inhabited. But as Jack opened up to her, not just as his daughter but as his partner, she began to see herself differently. She wasn't just a woman who had grown up without a father. She was a part of something important, something meaningful. One afternoon, while they were working late in Jack's office, Christina looked up from the documents she was reviewing and met his gaze. "Dad," she began, her voice slightly hesitant. Jack looked up, sensing the shift in her tone. "What's on your mind?" he asked, setting aside the report he was reading. Christina took a deep breath, then spoke again. "I've been thinking a lot about the future, about where I want to go with my life, and what kind of legacy I want to build." Jack leaned back in his chair, his eyes softening. "That's a big question," he said, his voice steady. "And it's one I've been thinking about too. I want to help you figure that out, whatever you decide." Christina smiled, feeling a surge of gratitude toward him. He had always been so supportive, but hearing him say those words meant more than she could express. "I know. It's just that I've always been afraid. Afraid of failing, afraid of making the wrong decisions. But now, with you here, I don't feel so alone in it." Jack's expression softened, and he walked over to where she sat. He placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch reassuring. "You're not alone anymore. We're a team, Christina. No matter what you choose, I'll be with you every step of the way." For a moment, Christina was silent, reflecting on how far they had come. A year ago, she had never even known this man. And now, not only was he her father, but he was someone who believed in her, someone who saw her potential. She had always struggled with doubt, unsure if she was worthy of the opportunities that had been handed to her. But now, with Jack in her life, those doubts were beginning to fade. "I've been thinking about going back to school," she said finally, her voice tentative. "Maybe pursue a degree in business or something related. I want to contribute, to build something that matters." Jack smiled, pride filling his chest. "That's exactly what I want to hear. Whatever you need, I'll support you." Christina looked at him, her eyes bright with determination. "Thanks, Dad. I think this is what I need to do. I'm not sure where it'll take me, but I want to try." Jack's heart swelled with pride as he looked at her. "I'm proud of you, Christina. No matter what happens, you've got the world in front of you. Don't be afraid to go after what you want." The conversation turned to other things as the evening passed, but in the back of Jack's mind, he couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. His daughter was growing, evolving, and stepping into her own potential. It wasn't just about the business or the wealth he had accumulated. It was about giving her the tools to build her own future, whatever that might look like. As the weeks turned into months, Christina applied for several universities, narrowing her choices down to a few that had excellent business programs. She worked hard, managing her time between her job at Jack's company and preparing for her future. Jack supported her every step of the way, helping her navigate the complex world of college applications and financial aid. It wasn't easy. There were moments of frustration and doubt, but Christina knew that she was not alone in it. Jack was always there, whether it was offering words of encouragement or simply being a sounding board for her ideas. Finally, after months of preparation, Christina received the news she had been waiting for. She had been accepted to her top choice university. The joy that filled her heart was overwhelming. She had done it. She had taken the leap, faced her fears, and come out the other side stronger than she ever thought possible. Jack was there when she received the email. He watched as her eyes lit up, the joy and relief evident in her expression. "You did it," Jack said, his voice thick with emotion. Christina turned to him, tears welling in her eyes. "We did it," she corrected, her voice full of gratitude. Jack smiled and pulled her into a tight hug. "I'm so proud of you," he whispered. In that moment, Jack knew that everything he had done, all the work, all the sacrifices, had been worth it. His family, the one he had never thought he would have, was now everything to him. And with Christina heading off to college, he knew that this was just the beginning of a new chapter. The future was wide open, and they were ready to face it together. Months passed, and the changes in Jack and Christina's lives continued to unfold in ways neither of them could have imagined. The future was still uncertain, but now, it seemed more promising than ever. Christina settled into her new life at college, a place that had once seemed like an impossible dream, but was now her reality. The transition wasn't without its challenges, but Jack was there for every step, whether it was offering advice or simply being a comforting presence in her life. Their bond had only grown stronger since the day they had first started their journey together. Christina's success at university was no surprise to Jack. She was determined, intelligent, and resilient. As she navigated the demands of her academic life, Jack couldn't help but feel proud of the young woman she had become. She wasn't just his daughter. She was a force in her own right, carving out a future she had always dreamed of. But the journey wasn't just about her academic accomplishments. It was about learning how to build a life together, navigating the complexities of family, success, and self-discovery. The phone calls, the visits, the quiet moments of conversation in Jack's office all reinforced the realization that family was not just about being there for the big moments. It was about being there through the mundane, the ordinary, the in-between times. Jack knew this now, and he cherished it. As Christina's college years continued, Jack began to see the world differently. He wasn't just a businessman with a successful career. He was a father who was actively involved in his daughter's life, making the effort to understand her world and her dreams. It wasn't about the wealth he had amassed or the deals he had closed. It was about being a part of something deeper, something more lasting, being there for her when it mattered. One winter evening, after Christina had returned home for a break, the two of them sat on the couch in Jack's living room, reminiscing about the months that had passed. It was a quiet moment, but it felt full, as if the weight of everything they had been through together was finally settling in. "I've been thinking a lot lately," Christina said, breaking the silence. "About everything. About you, about me, about what comes next." Jack turned to face her, a soft smile playing on his lips. "What are you thinking?" he asked gently. Christina paused, her eyes reflecting the uncertainty that still lingered within her. "I'm thinking about how much I've changed," she said quietly. "How much I've grown, and how much I've learned about you, about myself, about what it means to really be a part of something. I never thought I could have this, a real family, a real future. But now, I know that it's possible." Jack's heart swelled with pride, the weight of his emotions difficult to put into words. He had never been one for sentimentality, but in this moment, he couldn't help but feel overwhelmed. "You've come so far, Christina," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "And so have I. I never expected any of this. But now, I wouldn't trade it for anything. You've changed my life in ways I never thought possible. I'm proud of you, more than you know." Christina smiled, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice full of gratitude. "You've made me believe in myself in ways I never could before. You've shown me that family is more than just blood. It's about love and trust and support." Jack reached out, placing a hand on hers, a gesture that had become second nature to him now. "I'm always going to be here for you," he said softly. "No matter what happens, no matter where life takes us. We've built something real, something strong. And that's not going to change." The silence between them was comfortable, full of understanding. They didn't need to say more. Everything that mattered was already understood. In that moment, Jack realized that he had found something he never expected, true happiness. Not in his career, not in his wealth, but in his relationship with Christina. She wasn't just his daughter anymore. She was his partner, his friend, his family. And that was all he needed. As they sat together, the evening stretching on, Jack looked at Christina with a newfound sense of hope. The future was still ahead of them, full of unknowns, but one thing was certain: they would face it together. The bond they had formed was unbreakable, a foundation that would carry them through whatever challenges came their way. They had come so far, and no matter what happened next, Jack knew they had created something lasting. The past was behind them, and the future, whatever it held, was full of possibilities. For the first time, Jack didn't feel the need to control everything. He had learned that life, like family, was about trust and love, not perfection. And with Christina by his side, he was ready for whatever came next. Together, they had everything they needed. This touching story explores the unexpected bond between a father and daughter who find each other later in life. Their journey of self-discovery, healing, and forgiveness creates one of the most heartwarming and touching stories you will ever hear. As Jack, a successful CEO, and Christina, a young woman who grew up without a father, come together, they form a connection that reshapes their lives in powerful ways. Through moments of vulnerability and genuine care, this touching story reveals how family isn't just about blood, it's about love, trust, and the bonds we build over time. The story is full of ups and downs, yet it remains a testament to the power of human connection and the transformative strength of relationships. If you're a fan of touching stories that show the beauty of second chances, this journey will speak to you. In the end, these touching stories leave us with the reminder that family is not something you have to be born into. It's something you create, no matter the past. This heartwarming tale of love, loss, and redemption is a true testament to how the deepest and most meaningful relationships can form when we least expect it. Don't miss out on this inspiring and touching story that will remind you of the power of hope and connection.